For the first problem, it states, Frida throws a ball up from the roof of a building at a height of 21.7 feet. It strikes the ground 3.78 seconds later. The question is asking, what is the initial velocity of the ball? So we always start off with the same equation. H is equal to negative 16t squared plus v sub 0t plus h sub 0. If we're analyzing this problem, let's see what information was given. So there's variable of h, a variable of t, the velocity, and the starting height. So remember, h by itself is the ending height of the problem. In this case, this says that the ball strikes the ground. So the height, if it's on the ground, is 0 feet. If it's on the ground, it's 0 feet above the ground, and that's the end height. It did give me a time. It says 3.78 seconds. So for t, 3.78. The question asked, what is the initial velocity of the ball? So we do not know what the initial velocity is. That is what we're missing. Now, h sub 0 is the starting height. And in the beginning of the problem, it says she's throwing a ball from the roof of a building at a height of 21.7 feet. So it's starting at a height on the building of 21.7 feet. So now I'm going to replace all the variables with the numbers that we just found. So I would have 0 equals negative 16. T is 3.78 squared. Plus, we don't know velocity. And the time, again, is 3.78. Plus the starting height, which was given 21.7. Our goal now is to get the missing variable by itself. And in this case, the missing variable is the velocity. So we can solve this equation using order of operations. So I would do the exponent first. If I do 3.78 squared, I end up with about 14.29. It might make it easier to write the number 3.78 for time before the variable for velocity. You don't have to write it that way, but that might make it a little easier for you. Now I would multiply negative 16 by 14.29. When I do that, I end up with negative 228.61. And I still have plus 3.78 times the velocity plus 21.7. Now I could combine like terms. I could do negative 228.61 plus 21.7. If I do that, I end up with negative 206.91 plus 3.78 times the velocity. I'm going to continue the problem over here. So what I would do now is I could add the 206.91 to each side, the inverse operation. So I'd have positive 206.91 equals 3.78 times the velocity. Lastly, the inverse of multiplying would be dividing. And if I divide both sides by 3.78, I end up with about 54.74 equals the velocity. So to answer the question, what is the initial velocity? I would say the initial velocity is 54.74 feet per second. The second question on the practice says Terry launches a rocket from the ground at a rate of 115 feet per second. It's asking how long will it take to get to a height of 12 feet. And then it also wants to know why there's two answers. So if I write my original equation, which again is given to you, you just have to know what each variable represents. Let's figure out what I'm going to be plugging in for these variables. So, a rocket is launched from the ground. Well, if I'm starting on the ground, that means I'm 0 feet above the ground. And h sub 0 is our starting height. So that means I'm starting 0 feet in the air. I'm on the ground. It says at a rate of 115 feet per second. Feet per second tells us velocity. So my velocity is 115. It's asking how long. How long something is looking for time. So I don't know the time. And it's asking how long is it going to take to get to a height of 12 feet. So the height I'm looking for in this problem is 12. So I want to know how long it's going to take for this rocket to get to 12 feet. So that's where my rocket is ending for this problem, for the purpose. So let's plug in these numbers. So I have 12 equals negative 16 t squared plus 115 t plus 0. You cannot solve a quadratic unless it is equal to 0. So to move the 12, you need to subtract 12 from each side. So now I'd have 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 115t minus 12. The only way to solve this would be to use the quadratic formula. So if I'm plugging in the quadratic formula, I'd have negative t is equal to negative 115 plus or minus square root of 115 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 12 all over 2 times negative 16. When you solve the discriminant under the square, which is under the square root, I ended up with 12,457. And when you multiply the bottom, 2 times negative 16 is negative 32. So what you'll do is you'll split it up. One is addition, so negative 115 plus that answer, and one will be subtraction. When I solve both of those, I end up with about 0.11 seconds. And I also end up with about 7.08 seconds. So the original question asked how long will it take to get to a height of 12 feet and why are there two answers? Well, I have two positive answers. I have 0.11 seconds and 7.08 seconds. So that's how long it will take to get to that height. And the reason there's two answers is because a rocket goes up and down. So the rocket's starting on the ground and it's launched, it goes up, and eventually it will come back down. So at 12 feet, it'll hit 12 feet on this side going up, and it also reaches 12 feet again on its way back down. So after 0.11 seconds, it'll be 12 feet on the way up, and after 7.08 seconds, it will be 12 feet on the way back down. And that is why we have two answers for this.